Hi everyone, let's start the first lecture of our course, which is inventory control with known demand. This is chapter 4 of the textbook, and we will cover this chapter in 7 parts. The first 3 parts will be for the first week, and the last 4 parts will be covered in the second week. So this is the first part. In this lecture, we are going to have chapter 4 of our course, which is inventory control with known demand. And then chapter 5, we will consider the case of uncertain demand. So these two chapters, chapter 4 and 5, are categorized in the field of inventory control. Okay. As the agenda of this lecture, at first we'll have a brief introduction on inventory management, and then we'll see what types of inventory do we have in the industry, and then we'll review the relevant inventory costs, and then we'll have the first model of inventory control in our course, which is called economic order quantity, EOQ. And then we will extend this basic model to finite rate production, which is called EPQ, economic production quantity. And we will continue extending the basic model with considering the quantity discounts on EOQ model. And then we will have the case of multiple products with resource constraints on both EOQ and EPQ models. Okay, so this is the agenda of lecture 1 or chapter 4 of our textbook. So let's start at the brief introduction on the inventory management. Here we have a big picture on the investments in inventories. So this graph shows the distribution of investment in inventories over the industries in US economy in the third quarter of 2007. Okay, so as you see here, 29% of the investment inventories are in manufacturing environment, 23% in warehouse, and 30% in retail. So if we add up these numbers, we'll see that 82% of the investments in inventory are in somehow the supply chain environment, manufacturing, warehouse, and retail. Okay. So as you see here, the 82% of total investment is this number, $1.57 trillion. It's a huge number, right? And so we see that there is a great potential to improve the economy if we optimize the inventory levels in the supply chain. So this is why we do have this field in operations research, which is called inventory control or inventory management. Okay, and so why do we have inventory? We produce the goods, and then we need to store the goods in different levels, in manufacturer level, in retail level, in warehouse, in order to satisfy the demand of customers, right? So here the demand of customer plays the main role in our planning and controlling, or let's say in our managing the inventory levels. So demand could be deterministic or uncertain. Okay, so if we do have contract with our customers, let's say a manufacturer has contracts with its customers in order to ship certain amount of inventory or goods to its customers over the next 12 months. So by having those contracts, we can say the demand of this manufacturer is deterministic. There's no ambiguity here, and we know with certainty that what will be the demand or production level for the next 12 months. So in this case, we can consider the demand as a deterministic parameter. Or maybe we don't have contracts, so demand is not deterministic, but by assuming that demand is deterministic, we are considering a simplifying assumption. So yeah, Demand could be uncertain, demand could be stochastic, random variable, but if we consider its average, its mean as a deterministic demand, so this is a simplifying assumption here. Okay, so in the uncertain demand, which is more a realistic model here, we assume a random demand and we need to forecast the future demand as a random variable. Okay. The inventory concept in the warehouse or retailers, I think it's more obvious because they purchase the product, the goods, and they store the goods in their warehouse and then they sell or ship the products to their customers. Okay, but in a manufacturing environment, when we have a production environment, a manufacturing environment, we have different levels, different definitions for the inventories. Inventory could be as a raw material, it could be a component, it could be a sub-assembly, or it could be a finished good, a finished product. Okay, so usually the inventory control in a manufacturing environment is referred to material requirement planning, or MRP, which we will cover this in lecture 5 or chapter 8 of our textbook. Okay. So in inventory management, we are going to answer these two important questions: when and how much. So when should an order be placed? So we have an inventory, we have a warehouse, we have an inventory of a good, and we do have some goods in our inventory. So when should we place a new order to replenish our inventory? And after answering the when, the second question is how much? How much should we order? The quantity or the order size? Okay, so here we are going to answer these two questions by determining the time of placing orders and also the quantity size, or I mean the quantity or order size of the order. Okay. We will discuss several mathematical models in our course, and in the first lecture, this lecture or chapter 4 of our textbook, we will discuss the models with known demand assumption, and then in lecture 2, next lecture or chapter 5, we will discuss the uncertain demand models. Okay. We can assume that we have an outside vendor, so we are going to place order for an outside vendor, so we will purchase the goods from the outside vendor, so they will deliver the goods to our stock. So that's one case, or another case could be in a manufacturing environment, so we do have internal production, right? So different production departments can be actually considered as customer for the previous department and so on. Okay, so in the production environment, I mean in manufacturing environment, the inventory control can also be considered as production planning. So these two are synonym in manufacturing environment. So if you see somewhere that they refer to production planning, it's also the inventory control problem. So there is no difference between these two in a manufacturing environment. Okay. These are the types of inventories that we do have in industries. Inventory could be raw material or components. Components could be again a raw material or a sub-assembly, or it could be work in process in the production line, actually WIP, or at the end we can have finished goods as our inventory goods in our stock. Okay. Let's see what are the reasons we hold inventories. The first reason is economies of scale. So usually we do have fixed costs for placing order for an external vendor, or if we are considering a manufacturing environment, so changing the setup of the production line to produce another part has cost. So we call this as setup cost. So all these ones are considered in the category of fixed cost for changing the production line or for placing an order for an outside vendor. Okay, so in that case, when we order a large quantity of the goods, then we are amortizing the fixed cost over that quantity, right? So in that case, as you see here, we can optimize the order size, the quantity, in order to minimize the total cost, which one part of the total cost is the fixed cost of ordering. Okay. And the other reason is uncertainty in demand or supply patterns. So since we do have external demand, and demand usually in the real world is uncertain, so we need to have a stock in order to satisfy the uncertain demand in the future. If we don't have stock, then we may face the risk of lost sale or losing customer forever. Okay, so here we need inventory to somehow mitigate the risk of uncertainty in demand. Or we do have delivery lead times. So usually we do have lead time. So when you place order, it takes a time in order to that order to be delivered to your stock, right? So if you don't have inventory in your stock, you may face with lost sale and losing customers during that lead time if you don't have inventory. Okay, so again, because of that, we need to have some level of inventory in our stock to mitigate the risk of lost sales during the lead time period. Okay, and or we may have some risks for shortages or disruption in our suppliers. Okay, again, because of that, we need to have some level of inventories in our warehouse to mitigate the risk of disruption or shortages in the supplier side. Okay. The other reasons for holding inventories could be speculation, changing costs over time, or price fluctuations, transportation. So we do have some risks in transportation. So in order to mitigate those risks, we need to have inventories. Smoothing, if we don't have inventory, we may face sharp changes in our production level, in our demand, and so on. So, but by having inventory, we can smooth those changes. And in logistics, again, in distribution network and supply network, we will have some constraints and risks. So because of that, again, we need to hold inventories. And at the end, cost of maintaining control system. So when we do have larger inventories, so we don't need to actually have a very accurate and close monitoring of the inventory level. But when we have less inventories, we need to be careful. We need to monitor the inventory level and the sale trend to plan for the risks. I mean, in order to prevent the lost sale and so on. Okay. The characteristics of inventory systems: for demand, it could be constant or variable. So the simplest model that we do have here is EOQ model, and in this model we assume that demand is constant. But for the variable demands, we will consider it in aggregate planning and MRP later in our course. So, and also demand could be considered as known or random. Yeah, demand could be random, but we can assume that demand is constant in expectation. I mean, if we do have the expected value or the mean of the demand, we can assume that that's constant, that's known, and we can consider the demand as known by simplifying our model. Which we will cover this in the EOQ model in this lecture, and later we will have the random demand models. Okay. For the lead time is the time between placing the order and then having the order in our stock. Okay, so that's the lead time. And here we should be careful about the time unit. So the time unit of the lead time should be the same as the time unit for demand. So if we are defining the demand in yearly basis, so we need to define the lead time in the yearly basis as well. I mean, the time unit is a year, or monthly, or daily, weekly. So we should be careful about the time unit of the demand and the lead time. And demand also can be known or unknown. So yeah, usually it's unknown. Usually it depends to many different parameters. So it could be considered as a random variable in the model, or it could be considered as a deterministic parameter. Okay. The review time, here we have the continuous versus periodic review. In continuous review, we assume that we are monitoring the inventory level continuously over time. For example, in a retailer, we do have a scanner at the checkout point of a store, and it's linked to our inventory database. So by any transaction, the inventory level is updated. So in this case, we are monitoring the inventory level continuously, and whenever it reaches to a certain level, which we consider that level as a reorder point, we will place an order. Okay, so this is called continuous review. In the periodic, actually, we don't have this system, so we will review, we will check the inventory level in discrete point of times, and if it's lower than a certain level, we will place a new order. Other than that, we will leave it for the next review time in order to see if we need to place any order or not. This is called a periodic review. Okay. And so let's see how we treat the excess demands. So when we have excess demand, it could be back order or it could be lost sale. In the back order, we assume that we will satisfy those excess demand later when we have our order in our stock. So we will actually satisfy those demands. So in this case, we are not actually losing any customer. Instead, we are satisfying the excess demand with a delay after having our order in the warehouse. But in the lost sale case, customers will not wait in order to get their order after a while. They will satisfy their demand from outside, from our competitors and from outside of our system. So this is called lost sale situation. Or it could be a mix of these two, back order some and lose some. And inventory can change over time. We do have these two assumptions here. Perishability, so the quality of the goods can diminish over time. So in this case, we do have limited shelf time, like for the foods, right? Or obsolescence, the utility of the goods can diminish over time. For example, for automotive spare parts, when we do have new models, all the old models actually will have less demand in future. Okay. So that's the first part of our course. In the next part, we will see more details about inventory control problems. Okay, thank you.